Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day you're choosing to watch these videos. So, in the previous video, you should have watched about finishing up chapter 12 in this case, chapter 12, where you looked at trophic levels and how things eat from the main base level up to the top levels. And some animals were kind of mentioned around in there. And even this idea of what we're going to explore in this next section was also introduced when we initially started talking about biology. So if you recall, there's kind of like different categories of creatures in the ocean or how we classify them. And it's basically through their movement. So we just covered plankton, right? And if you recall, those are the floaters, right? So they can't move horizontally on their own. They are simply at the whim of the water. So the water movement is what moves them. They can move vertically on their own, right? So remember that they can increase their buoyancy either by oils in their bodies or through increasing their surface area, generally through having multiple limbs or things like that. Definitely go back and review that if you're like, oh wait, I do not recall that at all. So what we're going to dive into for this section is looking at the category of nekton. So think about what that word means if you recall from those previous lectures, and just take a moment. Like, what could nekton mean? Those are the swimmers of the sea, right? So anything that can move horizontally on their own. They have enough strength to go against the currents. And through nekton, we're going to divide them up further into different categories. We're going to start with marine invertebrates, and then we're going to go into marine reptiles, which you're like, oh my gosh, reptiles, I didn't even think about that. Yep. And marine birds, also. What? Swimmers, birds? Yep. And then we'll finish up with mammals. And what your book does, and what we will also subsequently do, is we're going to focus on those categories and mention just a few of the species that exist within those various categories. There is absolutely no way that we can get through talking about every single species. We just don't have enough time, right? Nor do we really fully know about every single species. But what you'll have to know will be kind of like how to separate out these various types of nekton and some characteristics of them. I don't think there's going to be like any short answer questions on the final in regards to like, tell me about this particular animal or whatever. So how you choose to take notes throughout the rest of these lectures is entirely up to you. If you want to write everything down, awesome. If not, you know that you always have the slides available for you to reference back to when you're preparing for the final. So that's kind of the overarching idea of this. So once we're done with nekton, then we'll talk about benthic organisms, which, if you can recall, like, okay, well, nekton are swimmers, benthic, and we've talked about benthic environments, is anything that lives on the ground, on or near the ground. So we'll dive further into that after we are done with this section. So with all of that, let's get into it with an overall overview of what nekton are. So the nekton are the swimmers of the sea. At the time of your book's publication, fourth edition, there were approximately 5,000 different species of vertebrates and invertebrates. So I want you to think about what's the difference between a vertebrate and an invertebrate. Think about it. If you, stretch your back out, maybe pop your back or pop your vertebrae, what could that mean? Vertebrae has a spine, right? So spine, V, no spine. And fish are the dominant species of this group, they're the dominant section of this group. To be considered a nekton, you have to be able to swim through the water to avoid sinking and deal with the environment. So we talked about all the different types of adaptations in previous lectures. I think they're all really wild, super, super cool. I think, depending on the animal and what part of the ocean they're living in, at the surface, in the depths, are they in the polar regions or are they in the equatorial regions? Are they dealing with really salty water or not salty water? How much light do they need? That kind of thing. So lots of really interesting adaptations because of that. And many different types of nekton make massive migrations over their whole lives. So we're going to look at, and your book has a map showing various migrations from different subsectors of nekton. And of course, this isn't like following around one particular animal. This was a scientific expedition where they were able to tag different animals. And I will also mention that this includes different varieties of these animals as well. So the top left image, this is tuna. So this includes yellowfin, bluefin, albacore. These little cuties are seals. And this would include, different types of seals, harbor seals, different types of sharks. So blue sharks, mako sharks, great white sharks, etc. Different types of whales, gray whale, humpback, blue whale, different types of turtle, green sea turtle, leatherbacks, and different types of albatross, black-footed, laosin, wandering albatross. What I really want you to get out of this, though, is to... Obviously, this is focusing just on the Pacific Ocean. So the Pacific Ocean is not the only place where we have these animals, but it's just, that's where this study focused. So I want you to observe this and kind of compare and contrast the different migrations that you see here. Do some animals make massive migrations, or do some kind of have just one particular path? Do they cross the entirety of the Pacific Ocean, or do they kind of hug along the coast? Do they tend to dominate in the north, or do they dominate in the south from this particular study? So I think, if I'm recalling correctly, a way that you will see a question about this on an assessment will be to match the animal with the migration pattern that you see. I'm 90% sure that's what a question that you'll see. So really fascinating, right? Can you imagine if you had to constantly move throughout your entire life? Maybe you're someone who is like a military kid, so maybe you have made a ton of migrations in your life. But think if you had to do that like every single year. Like, okay, time to go to Alaska now because that's where the food is. And then be like, okay, time to go to Mexico because gotta make babies. So just kind of an interesting thing that these creatures make such massive migrations, whereas we as humans, we tend to be relatively solitary. So going into different types of marine invertebrates. This picture here is of a very cute little pelagic tuna crab. These little buddies are a very important source for fish, turtles, birds, and mammals. They also tend to feed on small zooplankton and diatoms. So pelagic just means in the open ocean, like out in the water, and it being a tuna crab. What I want you to take note are like the adaptations that this little guy has, right? So it has like all these little kind of fuzzies on its legs, which can help with buoyancy. It's not microscopic. You would be able to see it in the water, though it would still be very tiny. And just noticing that it feeds at very high trophic levels, or very like the basic or the lower trophic levels, excuse me. So lots of energy these little buddies are taking in. So then when they get eaten, a lot of energy is lost, but they still can provide a decent amount of energy for the thing that consumes them. And then the next little buddy that your book goes into are squid in terms of marine invertebrates. So at the time of publication, there were over 300 logged species of squid. Squid are extraordinarily fast swimmers. They're very, very elusive. They can float, but they can also rest on the bottom of the sea. Some of them also have bioluminescence and coloration abilities to allow them to change color and also disappear rapidly. So remember, bioluminescence means that they can make light with their bodies. Actually, I believe even the picture that I used in the lecture was from a strawberry squid. So you could see the rows of light on its body. And they're really quite fascinating, right? So maybe you've heard of squid before, or maybe you've even eaten squid before. If you've ever had calamari, you've probably had squid. Also, if you've ever had squid ink pasta, an actuality of that, by the way, they don't just have like a squid farm. Actually, they tend to, from my understanding anyway, they actually tend to take the ink from cuttlefish as opposed to squid. Cuttlefish are almost like a cousin of squid. They also have little tentacles, and they also can camouflage with coloring abilities, but they have a bone plate in their body as opposed to being just mostly squishy. So different types of squid in general, they have 8 short arms, much like an octopus, but to be different from an octopus, they also have 2 long, thin tentacles with suckers on them or bioluminescent lures to help attract their prey. Sizes of squid can vary from a few centimeters, so being really, really teeny tiny, upwards of 15 meters long, which is the colossal squid. Larger species of squid also have very large eyes to help them identify and avoid large predators, especially if they live in the deep oceans. You need large eyes so that you can see the very, very, very dim lights in the deep oceans. So this graphic here on the right-hand side is just showing kind of size comparisons. And remember why, or maybe consider why there's a picture of a sperm whale on here as well. Why would that matter? Because sperm whales eat giant squid, right? And frankly, the giant squid is a perfect representation of how elusive squid can be, because we don't have very much footage or interactions with giant squid because they tend to avoid us. I don't blame them, quite frankly. The times that we have seen squid have been when they've come up to the surface, generally when they're sick and about to die. So we don't have a ton of footage or a good grasp on giant squid in general, which is kind of wild, right? I would love to go into other invertebrates, mainly octopus, but for sake of time, what I've done in the videos for today is an extra little clip from a TED Ed video. It's a little bit old, but still pretty cool, talking about octopus and how incredibly intelligent and amazing they are. So I encourage you to check that out, especially if you have an affinity towards octopus. Next up, and lastly, we're going to look at marine reptiles. So you may not think of marine reptiles as being nekton or necessarily like the fish type, but these are creatures that spend a lot of their time in the ocean. Thus, we consider them a marine nekton. So all reptiles are poikilotherms, which means they're cold-blooded, right? So they rely heavily on the temperature of the water. So a lot of times, a lot of these marine reptiles will spend a decent amount of time in warmer waters because they need to regulate their body temperature with the temperature around them. Sea snakes in particular, these little cuties here, are found in the warm waters of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. These little buddies are extraordinarily poisonous. They can dive really, really deep, as far as 100 meters and for up to 2 hours, because they have this adaptation to be able to pass nitrogen gas through the water and not absorb salt into their scales. If you see a sea snake, I think I've shown a little video of this at the beginning of the semester, but if you see a sea snake, don't interact with it. You're probably not gonna have a good time. So it might just like check you out to see if you're food and hopefully just swim away, but do not aggravate it. Don't freak out, because you might not have a good time after that. Sea turtles, a little sketch here is of a green sea turtle. So sea turtles vary from land turtles because they cannot retract their head into their shells. They can't suck on in when they get scared. And their front limbs have been modified into flippers. So that's an evolutionary adaptation. So they went from having footies to having flippers so that they can swim. They mate offshore where females will then lay their eggs. Thankfully, they do lay a large number of eggs because a lot of them die on their journey from beach to water, and then in the water they can get eaten as well. Unfortunately, all population numbers of all types of sea turtles are on the decline, mainly due to human activity, through hunting, through habitat destruction, and not intervening in like a good way, but intervening with the egg laying situation. Something I do also want to mention with turtles and eggs, which is a really big concern with climate change, is that the gender of the turtle is determined largely by the temperature of the sand. And the warmer the sand, the higher the chance of the turtle being female. So I want you to think for a second, maybe pause the video and think for a second why that might not be a great thing and what the issues could be with that. So hopefully you took a pause for a second and thought about it. When you have too high of a female to male ratio, you're not going to be able to continue growing your population, right? So not great. We're not the planet where Wonder Woman is found and somehow they still make babies. You know what I mean? So, not great, unfortunately. So with higher water temperatures, higher air temperatures means higher sand temperatures, which generally will likely mean a higher influx of female turtles. So not fantastic. Last reptile, or a couple here that I want to mention, one which is in this sketch is called a gavial. So this is a fish-eating crocodile, saltwater crocodile in India. They have a very, very, very long snoot, long and narrow snoot. And of course, there are other types of seawater crocodiles as well. Don't mess with them, like, it's generally not a very good idea. And then lastly, we have the marine iguana. So marine iguanas are really fascinating in that they look like real life Godzillas. And fun factsies, actually, the creator of Godzilla emulated what he saw as being Godzilla after marine iguanas. And they are found in the Galapagos Islands, and only there, and they have a really rough go at the start of their lives. I encourage you to check out these two clips from one from Planet Earth, and the second one's a Snoop Dogg version, which just brings me a lot of joy because I find it very funny. So I encourage you to check those out. They are, again, linked on the Unit 4 videos and on the homework for this week. But also what I want to mention with marine iguanas, they are extraordinary swimmers. They can spend a lot of time underwater hunting, and really, really fascinating little creatures. So that concludes introduction of Nekton, what they are, and going through the different types of marine invertebrate and marine reptiles. So in the next video, you will investigate marine birds, which I think are really fascinating. And then when we come back, we'll look at other types of Nekton as well. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day.